Welcome to the deep dive.
Ah.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to picture yourself behind the wheel of a really beautifully engineered sports car.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. So you're on this clear open highway and you just completely floor the accelerator. The engine is screaming at, 7,000 RPMs.
Burning a ton of fuel.
Exactly. You are burning a gallon of premium fuel every single minute. But you look down at the speedometer and you're barely doing 15 miles an hour.
That's not a great feeling.
No, because it's not just that you left the parking brake on, right? The transmission is physically jammed in first gear. So you're converting all of that explosive, expensive potential energy into, well, just heat, smoke, and noise. Zero actual forward momentum.
Yeah, and that image of, burning massive amounts of fuel just to inch forward, that captures the exact operational state of so many mid-sized companies today.
Completely.
The immense effort from the staff is there, the financial resources are, being spent, but the output just simply does not match the mechanical input.
Which brings us to today's topic. We are diving into a January 2026 report from Digifix, and it focuses specifically on mid-sized Australian businesses.
Right, a very specific, very competitive market.
Yeah, and they're tackling this concept that gets thrown around a lot, which is workflow automation. So our mission for this deep dive is to completely strip away the corporate buzzwords.
Get down to the actual mechanics.
Yes, exactly. We want to look at how automating specific tasks practically transforms a company's bottom line and, fundamentally changes the daily lived experience of the employees. Plus, it creates this massive structural safety net for legal compliance.
And I think the underlying context to establish really early on here is that workflow automation is not merely about doing your current tasks a little bit faster.
Right. It's not just a speed upgrade.
No, it represents a fundamental restructuring of how a business operates at its core.
Mm-hmm.
It's the mechanism that allows a company to, scale up its operations and take on more clients without suffering a crushing increase in their operational costs.
Because if you just add more clients to a broken system, you just break it faster.
Exactly. It is, to use your analogy, the process of finally shifting the car into second, third, and fourth gear.
I love that. But before we can celebrate the cure, we really have to examine the disease.
You do.
Because the Digifix article spends a lot of time quantifying what they call the productivity gap, created by manual workflows. And the sheer amount of time being vaporized is just staggering.
It really is.
They highlight that manual data entry takes an average of 5 hours a week, but automated workflows drop that to just 1 hour.
Yeah, and to understand that 4-hour difference, we have to look at what manual data entry actually looks like in practice. Because it's rarely just, typing numbers on a keyboard.
Right, it's never that simple.
It's an employee downloading a massive CSV file from a sales portal, opening it in a spreadsheet, realizing the date format is completely incompatible with the accounting software.
Oh man, the date format mismatch is the worst.
Right. So then they're manually hunting down mismatched cells, deleting commas, copying blocks of data, and then pasting it into a web form that times out if they take too long.
Unbelievable.
That immense, painful daily friction is where those 5 hours go.
Well, the automated system, I assume, just pulls the raw data from point A, translates the format instantly in the background, and injects it into point B.
Precisely. It's seamless.
So that remaining 1 hour is probably just the human, verifying the final numbers to make sure the machine behaved.
That is the exact mechanical difference. And it scales across other critical tasks, too. The source notes invoice processing goes from a 3-day ordeal down to 1 day.
3 days to 1. Wow.
Yeah, and generating reports plummets from 2 full days to just a half day. Because manual invoice processing usually means, an email arrives, someone opens a PDF, checks it manually against a printed purchase order.
Physically walks it over to a manager's desk.
Exactly. And then waits for that manager to return from a 2-day conference just to get a signature.
Okay, I hear the financial argument. And, 4 hours saved per employee sounds incredible in theory. But it also creates a massive disconnect for me.
Oh, so?
If the math is this painfully obvious, why on earth are companies still doing it the hard way? It feels like carrying buckets of water from a river every day when someone is standing there offering to install indoor plumbing. Why wouldn't you just install the pipes?
Well, this raises an important question about the sheer inertia of business operations. Because it is almost never a case of a business owner looking at the data and deciding they prefer to bleed money.
Right. No one wants to lose money on purpose.
The primary barrier is intimidation. Mid-sized companies usually operate on a highly fragile patchwork of legacy systems. Software bought 10 years ago that barely functions, patched together with manual employee workarounds.
Ah, so the thought of ripping out the floorboards to install those new pipes feels like it would shut down the whole house.
Exactly. They know the buckets are inefficient. But mapping out every single broken process, auditing the bottlenecks, and migrating to a new digital system, it feels like an existential threat to their current stability.
Okay, so theory and abstract time savings are great, but theory rarely survives contact with the actual factory floor. Do the sources track a business that actually ripped up their floorboards and, survived the plumbing installation?
They do, actually. Digifix provides a highly detailed case study of a mid-sized manufacturing firm based in Sydney.
Okay, Sydney. How big are they?
They employ over 50 people and act as a top supplier in their sector. Prior to implementing automation, their supply chain management was incredibly opaque.
Yeah.
They had virtually no clear view of their production pipeline.
Just flying blind.
Completely. And their staff was burning 10 hours every single week just wrangling that manual data entry we described earlier.
10 hours per person. That's insane.
And the metric that really jumped off the page for me was the processing time. It was taking them 5 full days just to process a single order.
5 days of just internal friction. Right. But here's where it gets really interesting. Alongside that 5-day wait, they were operating with a 20% error rate.
Which is catastrophic for a manufacturer.
Let's translate that 20% error rate into something every day, right? Like a local coffee shop. It's not just that 1 out of every 5 customers gets the wrong drink. It's the cascade of consequences.
Right, the ripple effect.
Yeah. The barista makes a latte, realizes the ticket said black coffee, so they have to throw the latte away. That's wasted milk, wasted beans, wasted cups. Then they have to halt the entire production line to remake the black coffee, making the 4 people waiting behind them increasingly angry. The cost of that one single error just spirals outward.
And the manufacturing equivalent of your coffee shop scenario involves misallocated raw materials, shipping heavy products to the wrong warehouses, processing incredibly expensive returns.
And managing furious clients on top of that.
Yes, it is a massive hemorrhage of cash and market goodwill that literally threatens the viability of the firm.
So they finally bite the bullet. They implement workflow automation. And the post-automation metrics feel almost unbelievable.
The turnaround is stark.
Yeah, their order processing time dropped by 40%. They saw a 30% increase in total processing capacity. And the crucial detail here is that they didn't hire a single new staff member to handle that extra 30% volume.
Let's actually break down the financial reality of those percentages. By eliminating that 10 hours a week of manual data entry and streamlining the order pipeline, their direct labor costs for these specific operations dropped from $100,000 down to $70,000.
Wait, let me just synthesize this in real time. Labor drops by $30,000, and the article says their error-related expenses plummeted from $20,000 down to $5,000.
Right.
So that is another $15,000. We're looking at $45,000 in direct savings just left sitting on the table.
Yeah.
For a company of 50 people, that is the equivalent of an entire starting salary.
And you have to remember that $45,000 only represents the direct, easily quantifiable savings on the spreadsheet. The indirect benefits are arguably more critical to the long-term survival of the firm.
See, my mind immediately goes to soft metrics when I hear indirect benefits. Things like brand reputation or corporate synergy, which don't technically pay the electric bill. What is the actual structural safety net they gained by dropping the error rate?
Well, reducing a 20% error rate stabilizes the entire business architecture. When a firm constantly mismanages supply chains and botches large deliveries, they open themselves up to breach of contract disputes.
Oh, right, the legal side.
Yeah, penalization clauses, severe legal risk from their buyers. By fixing the error rate, they mitigate that legal exposure. They also stop bleeding existing clients to their competitors because they transform from a chaotic vendor into a highly reliable supplier. Retention is always cheaper than acquisition.
That makes total sense, but I want to push back on this narrative for a moment.
Okay, go ahead.
We just walked through a scenario where a company slashed $30,000 in labor costs and increased their output by 30% without hiring anyone. It is incredibly easy to look at those numbers and assume that workflow automation is just a polite corporate synonym for firing people.
I hear that concern a lot.
Right. If the machines are doing the work faster and cheaper, how is this actually a win for the employee sitting at a desk?
What's fascinating here is how the data tracks the actual lived experience of the staff following the transition. The Digifix article measures a metric called resource utilization.
Okay.
Before they automated, the staff spent 60% of their total time on routine, mundane tasks. After automation, that number dropped to 20%.
That's a huge drop.
It is. And simultaneously, their IT infrastructure utilization dropped from 80% down to 50%, meaning the servers and networks weren't constantly overloaded with inefficient manual data queries.
Getting 40% of their work week back sounds great, but again, doesn't that just mean management looks at them and says, well, great, we only need you for 3 days a week now. We are cutting your hours.
Not at all. It introduces the concept of resource optimization. The goal of this kind of automation isn't to replace the human. It is to extract the robotic tasks from the human.
Extract the robotic tasks.
Okay, think back to those 10 hours of manual data entry. No human being is biologically wired to find joy in copying and pasting serial numbers between spreadsheets for 10 hours a week. It is mentally exhausting, soul-crushing work that leads directly to burnout and high turnover.
So the machine is doing the robotic work so the human can do the human work.
Exactly. Reallocating human resources means freeing those employees to engage in the exact activities machines fail at: complex problem-solving, strategic planning, and genuine relationship building.
Things a script can't do.
Right. When an employee's daily responsibilities shift from mindless data entry to calling a client to strategically forecast their needs for the next quarter, their baseline motivation and job satisfaction increase dramatically.
And that shift in employee energy has to bleed over to the customer side, right? If the staff isn't bogged down fighting with spreadsheets, they actually have the bandwidth to talk to the client. And the Digifix source does note a direct improvement in customer satisfaction.
The mechanism behind that improved satisfaction is twofold. First, the automated systems process the basic requests faster than a human ever could, meaning customers experience drastically reduced response times.
They aren't waiting 5 days to hear back about a simple order confirmation.
Exactly. Second, automation allows a business to collect service quality feedback from multiple touchpoints automatically. The system gathers data on what the customer actually wants, allowing those reallocated, energized employees to proactively serve them.
Instead of just constantly reacting to complaints and apologizing for delays. Okay, that paints a much better picture of the human element. The employees are doing meaningful work, the customers are getting their correct orders instantly. But how does the underlying digital architecture of the business actually handle this?
It's a big shift.
Yeah, because you have data moving at lightning speed, higher capacities, less human oversight. That feels like a recipe for total chaos if the systems aren't perfectly aligned.
Preventing that chaos requires the integration phase, which effectively acts as the new central nervous system for the company. The article focuses heavily on the mechanical link between workflow automation, ERP, which is Enterprise Resource Planning, and CRM, Customer Relationship Management Systems.
Let's ground those acronyms in a functional analogy, because data silos can be a very abstract concept.
Sure, go for it.
I like to think of a business like a busy restaurant. The CRM, the customer management side, is your wait staff. They're out on the floor talking to the customers, taking orders, and promising perfectly cooked steaks.
Right.
The ERP, the resource planning side, is the kitchen inventory. They know exactly how many steaks are actually sitting in the refrigerator. If your restaurant has a data silo, it means the waiter and the kitchen literally cannot communicate.
They're completely disconnected.
Right. So the waiter happily promises a steak to a VIP client, completely unaware that the kitchen ran out of beef an hour ago. The customer is furious, the waiter is embarrassed, and the kitchen is overwhelmed.
That perfectly illustrates the mechanical breakdown. Integration eliminates the wall between the waiter and the kitchen. When automated workflows connect the CRM and the ERP, your customer information, your physical inventory, and your financial forecasting are synced continuously in real time.
So they always match.
Exactly. The moment the waiter takes the order in the CRM, the ERP automatically deducts one steak from the inventory and updates the daily revenue projection.
The left hand finally knows what the right hand is doing. But the Digifix article emphasizes that this integration isn't just about managing warehouse stock. It gets very specific about how this architecture ties into playing by the rules, especially given the legal landscape in Australia.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to examine compliance and risk management. Australia operates under a highly regulated business environment.
They don't mess around.
They really don't. The source specifically highlights bodies like the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, or APRA, which heavily monitors financial transactions, alongside the Privacy Act of 1988, which strictly governs how customer data is safeguarded.
I can imagine that trying to adhere to strict APRA regulations using manual spreadsheets is
It
terrifying.
goes beyond terrifying.
Yeah.
Manual reporting in a strict regulatory environment is an immense liability. Think about the mechanics of a compliance audit.
Okay.
Imagine an auditor demands proof of a specific $10,000 transfer that occurred 3 years ago, including who authorized it and where the data was stored.
In a manual system. Oh boy.
Right. An employee has to dig through thousands of old emails, search physical filing cabinets for printed invoices, and cross-reference old hard drives.
And if they miss one document?
Or if an employee accidentally emailed a sensitive file to the wrong person during the search. The company faces massive fines and catastrophic reputational damage.
How does an automated central nervous system change the mechanics of that audit?
Through the implementation of automated audit trails, when the CRM and ERP are integrated, the automated system attaches a digital fingerprint to every single action.
So it's always watching.
Quietly, yes. It logs every data transfer, every manager's approval, and every dollar moved with exact timestamps. It transforms compliance from a frantic, week-long scramble through filing cabinets into an invisible, continuous background process.
That is wild.
When the auditor asks for that $10,000 transaction, the system instantly generates a perfect, standardized, cryptographically secure trail of documentation.
Okay, we have established that this is essentially a superpower for a mid-sized business. You carve $45,000 out of your operational waste. Your employees get to do human work instead of robot work, and your legal compliance becomes a frictionless background process.
It's transformative.
So, what does this all mean? If someone is sitting at their desk right now listening to this and decides they want to champion this transformation at their company tomorrow, they can't just walk into the IT department and yell, automate everything. What is the actual mechanical step one?
Step one requires putting away the software catalogs and doing the unglamorous work of analyzing your current state. The Digifix article stresses the absolute necessity of process mapping and bottleneck analysis.
Process mapping.
Yeah. You have to literally take a whiteboard and draw out exactly how a specific task travels through your company today. Whose inbox does it sit in? Which manager takes 3 days to approve it? Where does the data get stuck?
Because if you skip that step and just apply high-speed software to a terrible process, you haven't fixed the problem. You have just figured out a way to make the exact same mistakes at the speed of light.
Precisely. You cannot automate a fundamentally broken process. You must optimize the physical steps first. Once the map is clean and logical, the article suggests finding the repetitive, rules-based bottlenecks and applying RPA robotic process automation.
Let's explain RPA for a second. Rather than entirely new software that forces everyone to learn a new interface, RPA acts like an invisible digital employee.
That's a good way to put it.
It watches the mouse clicks and keystrokes of a human worker, learns the exact sequence of moving data from screen A to screen B, and then perfectly replicates those actions thousands of times a second without ever taking a coffee break.
That is the exact mechanism of action. But as the article heavily warns, identifying the bottleneck and programming the RPA is only half the battle.
What's the other half?
The physical implementation comes with severe roadblocks, primarily employee resistance to change and complex technical integration hurdles.
We talked about the inertia earlier. Even if you map the process perfectly and the new digital employee is brilliant, people simply do not like having their daily habits disrupted. How do you get a company of 50 or 500 people on board without causing a mutiny?
Well, the source outlines that overcoming this requires comprehensive change management programs. You cannot just drop a new automated system on a desk without warning.
Right, that never goes well.
You have to provide deep training and clearly demonstrate the why to the employees. You have to show them mechanically how this removes the worst, most boring parts of their day.
Show them what's in it for them.
Exactly. And on the technical side, the most crucial strategy is utilizing a phased deployment approach.
Meaning you absolutely do not attempt to roll this out to the entire global enterprise on a random Tuesday morning.
That is a recipe for total operational failure. A phased approach means you pilot the automation in one single department or apply it to one highly specific task.
Keep the blast radius small.
Right. You let the system run, you gather aggressive feedback from the small group of employees using it, you refine the custom IT solutions to fix the inevitable bugs, and only then do you slowly expand its footprint.
So it proves itself.
Exactly. It built organic employee buy-in because the staff gets to see it working and succeeding on a small scale before it ever touches their own desks.
This journey through the Digifix article has been incredibly eye-opening. We started by looking at mid-sized businesses burning fuel while stuck in first gear, crippled by 5-day order times and catastrophic 20% error rates.
It's a tough place to be.
It really is.
Right.
But by breaking down the actual mechanics of workflow automation, we have seen how taking the parking brake off can cut those order times by 40%, instantly reclaim $45,000 in lost revenue, and create a central nervous system that makes strict regulatory compliance completely invisible.
And crucially, it reclaims the human potential trapped beneath soul-crushing data entry.
Yes. It represents a total paradigm shift in how we define what it means to be productive in a modern economy. So for you listening, whether you are managing a massive mid-sized manufacturing firm or you are simply an individual trying to optimize your own daily workflow, the first step remains the same.
Grab that whiteboard.
Grab a whiteboard, map out your bottlenecks, and find exactly where you are forcing yourself to do the work of a machine. That is how you reclaim your time.
And looking at that reclaimed time leads to a rather profound implication for the future, I think.
Oh, like what?
Well, if workflow automation eventually becomes the standard baseline for every single business, meaning zero administrative errors, perfect legal compliance, and instant processing across the entire market, how will any company stand out?
Wow. Yeah, if everyone is perfect.
Right. Once that robotic baseline is perfectly optimized and everyone is moving at the exact same hyper-efficient speed, will raw human creativity, complex problem solving, and genuine empathy become the only true competitive advantages left in the market.
That is something to think about the next time you feel like you are driving with the parking brake on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.